The sun rose and shone its glorious goodness on all that stirred below.
All the creatures of the night retreated into their tiresome slumber.
And from all corners of the moon,
Beings that lay dormant through the long, weary dark,
began to assume their consciousness.
it was a day like any other, a different day of sameness and repetitiveness. The yesterday that was no more had started again. At first it started, then continued to start, and just as quickly began to finish.
A brick commenced its insomnolence, and in doing so opened the eyes it didn't have. Taking upon a particular mode of being, that which is taken when rousing from deep sleep, it outstretched the arms that weren't and gave a long, sorrowful yawn from the non-existent mouth. It got out of bed and trudged along the bedroom floor, slowly but surely undressing itself of the pyjamas it wasn't wearing. For the same reason, that it was a brick, it put on the clothes it didn't wear for the day and continued its doleful, mournful dejectedness. Stricken with the urge to be, it said something. Not being able to talk, how it said what it did, fathom what it wanted to say, or want to say anything at all, is still a mystery to be explored. An answer or constructive conclusion could only be possible to maybe exist by 1. Entering the depths of the enigmas of existence, the anomalies of truth and being, and 2. Stepping into a journey of experience of both the finite and infinite dimensions of both everything and nothing. And even then, an answer or possible conclusion would be so highly improbable that if it were to occur in any shape or form, the entire everything of everything would cease to everything. "O life," it began with such strenuous exasperation it nearly spontaneously combusted. "How frivolous you are! What tedious activities you bring forth, lay out on the platter for the things to take and turn. Mould into themselves these things do too. These things that are what they long to be, reflected in the lobster's lustrous eye. Oh!" Aside from the fact that no one in particular was being talked to, conscious being in the entire universe was filled with the sudden urge to question his or her very own existence, but didn't for whatever reason it was that prohibited them from doing so. She then continued to not do what she was doing, and upon finishing such an impossible task, instantaneously appeared downstairs. Her house was one story, no basement. After appearing downstairs, she started the laborious task of making toast. Toast she couldn't eat, or even make. Nonetheless, she soldiered on and began toasting the soon-to-be toast. Around her, her battle-strewn kitchen was battle-strewn, with unused plates and uneaten food laying scattered throughout the bunkers of the large monotonously grey room. That was monotonously grey to monotonously contrast with the monotonously grey-painted house. Monotonous.
Tedious, she groaned to herself, after heaving a long, breathless, void sigh. She repeated the word tedious several times in the exact manner of the initial play. For a long while she did what bricks normally do, or maybe not do, be a brick. The toast was made. After not finishing not eating the toast, she packed together her things, and considering that she was a brick wasn't much, wasn't anything really. Questioning herself, then changing her mind, she actually spent quite some time choosing what not to take, that she ended up not being able to take, and taking what she didn't have to, which also didn't end up going with her because it wasn't anything. And with this she embarked on her long dreary road journey to work. "So synonymous," the red brick yelled, but didn't whisper or think after appearing outside and not anywhere else but outside. Her unexcitable, spontaneous passage to work continued before starting, and as a passenger on this lonely, wholesome walkway she thought of many. Sameness, meaninglessness, coincidence, randomness, she muttered under her breath as she traipsed her way down the yellow brick road, which, ironically, wasn't yellow. It wasn't any shade or colour. It was more of a thing than a colour, an unholy abomination that clung to the ground and shook so slightly that it didn't really shake at all. She continued for some time, continually muttering under her breath the words she repeated more often than hardly ever. She did for quite some time, and then, out of nowhere, was greeted by a great precipice in her mind. It was as if a thought of another had entered her consciousness. She then wasn't sure, but was certain that she was being watched. She wasn't, but there was a mischievous, slightly less red brick watching her from the distance. He was lurking behind the shrubs. The shrubs that had disappeared, leaving him completely and utterly exposed. She took a moment to analyse the situation as the other brick just congested there without moving. "They're behind the bushes," she yelled, taking flight and hiding behind a bee's nest. Damn, he saw me. The nerve of his eyes, so big in their not being. What a sloth. Such a rapid slope of declivity. Curse him. What contempt and malice behind his aplomb visage. His sesquipedalian aura of self-justified equanimity. Hooch! And while the other slightly less red brick did not move or even sway in the present breeze that had such an impellent force that many things around the two motionlessly immobile bricks budged and slowly did so, the brick was still. It stared at her blankly, quite drearisome and dusty. The brick was still. It still stared at her blankly, and it was still quite drearisome and dusty. The brick was still. In an attempt to escape her own soulless stare, as well as his, upon realizing the lonesomeness in the task at hand, She picked up a nearby brick and hurled it at the brick, which struck the brick, which shattered into a million pieces upon being struck by the brick, but before it did, it approached the red brick and said, "Don't you work at Grandma's?" "It's a question." Her void expression incorrectly left as she validly contradicted. "I find your upfrontness astounding and quite arousing. Tell me there, fair traveller, from the north, that is both east and west while being south. Your question presents me with quite a predicament. Do you mean to say, which existence is that which it isn't, or which existence is that which it is?" "Which is, which isn't," he gleefully responded, almost directly, not really understanding what either of them was saying. The Big Bang happened again. He then continued to rhyme, with the utmost confidence he had been showing at that present moment, and careless abandon beyond your wildest dreams of eroticism. "So you do, you say? Then I ask, if I should pay, will you come with me to play?" As the leaves blew past them, the gravitational conditions limited them from slowly but surely floating to the open mass of nothing that surrounded their tiny, insignificantly inconsequential, improbably impossible moon, and eventually being sucked into and destroyed by the empty vacuum that constitutes what isn't. Her face, all the while, had contorted with outrageous disgust at his absurd poem, before, but not after, its nonness swelled as she fell in love with this strange yet equally compelling brick, who was slightly less red than her, which stood before her standing. "You scoundrel!" she hollered so loudly that no one and the slightly less red brick that had been pouring his heart and soul, none of which he actually had, into courting this fair-haired maiden couldn't hear her. That which deserves no merit mustn't be spoken of so lightly. However, I do find myself attracted to your blind heart and noble gallantry. Tell me, gentle stranger, what is it exactly you propose we play?" She concluded her statement by emphasizing the words tell, is, propose, and play to add flirty incompetence to her newly found desire. "Well," he alluded. She became enjammed. He alluded again. She loosened from the enjambment, and alluded also. He had been stuttering. As even he did not know what was about to come from his poor improvisational skills, he did not know what she had said. He did not know what he was going to say either. "Just a little game I call a hip hip hooray. We dance around just like so, and then attempt to say that which we can't but what is vast, vast in confounded array. We then touch toes, and then brush noses, both of which we are missing. Who would have noticed? And then to see that the end is near, I extend my hand, and you take it, won't you, dear?" "Lather yourself in baby wipes, fool," she said back at him, like a mute to a train inspector. It left him with an expressionless expression, that which could be accomplished by not being accomplished, expression accomplished. They both stopped doing nothing as they had suddenly and unexpectedly noticed, but didn't really because they were bricks and cannot stop doing as they cannot do in the first place, or notice either, that they had vanished. His audacious performance of manageable proportions had caused them to sporadically appear to the left, 5 inches to it, without any sign of it happening. Now, although we see 5 inches as a mere 5 inches, they didn't. You see, because they cannot encompass time and space, they hadn't the vaguest idea of what had occurred intermittently. They actually thought they had died. But then they realized that they hadn't actually died upon remembering that they were bricks, and, as we all know, bricks can't die, or live, or anything for that matter. The red brick walked over to the nearby ice cream stand and bought a cone for herself. She reached into her pocket with her arm and hand, grabbed the money that lay there disturbed, and handed it to the ice cream vendor, who looked a lot like somebody. Now that they were left from where they once were, that rudely would have been to the right of where they were right now, which was left, they started to notice what they had already. A few trees, more bricks, all different shades of course. Don't be absurd, of course they did. A big was there. It was big, not to say that it was actually big in size, it was quite small, just to say that it was in actual fact bigness in itself. Anyway, they looked around wide-eyed for a while, and while they did, they looked around wide-eyed, until they finally somethinged. "Hark," she managed to say sparingly. "But I don't hear anything," he shouted, extremely loudly so as to be heard over the deafening noise he was cupping his ears from in order to nullify. The sound that came from no apparent source was a very strange sound. Think firstly of a giant bird, then of 1,000 crickets, thirdly of a piercing scream from a banshee. Revving cars and a whole street full of car alarms from the cars that are being revved would come in 4th and 5th respectively. Then put those sounds in a blender and listen to them after a night of heavy drinking, so heavy you wake up crying and naked on the other side of your bed, and next to you is someone that you have never met in your entire life. They are naked. Fill in the gaps, using a combined nail gun, chainsaw and power drill in an empty space that is so large that the echo carries for several minutes. The sound they experienced was like that, but looked nothing like it.